Good afternoon. My name is Joseph Lloyd and I source cars for people on a professional basis. Although most of the cars I source are between £1,000 and £5,000, very often I've been asked to show something a little bit cheaper on the channel, and so I came up with No Budget Reviews, the series where we look at cars that you can buy in good condition with an MOT for under £1,000 and you can enjoy driving. We don't film this in an expensive manner, we don't use separate microphones, we don't use dual head tripods, we don't even use a DSLR, but we do have a lot of fun. Well viewers, I do sometimes like to revisit what I consider some of my favourite reviews on the channel from time to time, and this is no exception. This is a 1996 Nissan Primera 1.6 Precision. It's one of the very late P10 Primeras. This is a Series 3, dates from March 1996, and yes, my parking is terrible. I would probably pull the car a little bit further back, which I might do in a second, but I just need to show you around the car first. Not hit any walls or anything like that, but we're okay for a moment. So the P10 was produced from 1990 to 1996. I think some of the early ones had the most confusing trim structure ever. One of the reasons for that was Nissan's importer at the time, I think they were called AFG or something like that. They had a war with the Nissan Motor Company about pricing and things like that, so they overpriced these cars and produced loads of confusing trim levels, which are sort of weird levels of equipment, in sort of an effort not to produce too much market share. The one I reviewed in 2019 was also 1.6. It was a very early one on an H plate, which had been produced in 1990. It was number 80 off the production line in Sunderland. It was owned by Mr. Coleman, rubbish mechanic at the time. This is a whole kind of 5.5 years later. It's a March 96. I have also driven a 2-litre saloon, automatic, owned by Mr. Chris James. He's had a lot of cars on the channel, but I actually prefer the 1.6s. I certainly prefer the manual ones. There's nothing really wrong with the automatic Primeras. In fact, Chris's one in particular is in amazing condition. But I like the manual ones. This is a really sweet gearbox, and the GA16 engine, which is fitted to this car, just revs so sweetly. It's just a delight. So we can see this car does need some wheel trims. They are coming. Martino, who had the Hyundai X2 Pony that you would have seen on the channel at some point last year, just bought this. And I really like this. I think I prefer this to his Hyundai, personally. It's a much nicer car to drive, but then it's a lot more modern, and it was a much more expensive car than that Hyundai. So although they were actually available around the same time, that's a 91, these were available in 91 as well, I would say this is the thing I prefer. In fact, I got very close to buying one of these in the latter half of last year. I didn't quite, and I'll show you one of the reasons why I didn't buy that one. It was also this colour. It was a slightly better equipped one, but this is towards the sort of base level. It's basically like a slightly upgraded Primera Equation, which is a base model, but we've got the rust, and it's covered up at the moment, but this car is going to need welding for the MOT, which is in September, so we've got a few months to sort that out. But yeah, it's not good. It's not brilliant, so that will be sorted out at some point. But apart from that, this car, which lived in the sort of Epsom area, as you can see, which is where I was living at the time that the channel started back in 2018. It's one of these ones that's in the expanded optional emission zone area, and so it's now been sold to Martino, who has paid well within No Budget Reviews money for this. So we're okay in that respect. It's going to be okay in terms of people saying, "Oh, that car's worth too much money." Well, this one is not, and one of the reasons for that is if we kind of take a look inside, we'll see we don't actually have a rev counter. We don't have electric mirrors. We don't have aircon. We don't really have very much. We've got a cassette player in here. And a lot of you will think this is the most exciting thing ever. And in fact, we've got some cassettes actually just here. We got some Genesis, for example. Unfortunately, a really neat sort of cassette storage solution that some of the earlier Primeras had isn't in this car. That this dash is actually a bit different. I can't remember what the differences actually are with this now, but we haven't got the cassette storage in there, which is a bit of a shame. And also, I think these switches here would have been for things like the electric windows and things like that earlier on, but this car doesn't have any electric rear windows. It's just got the manual ones, so that might be a reason. We've also got this very jazzy 90s seat trim and a manual sunroof, which works. If I can be bothered to, there we go. That's working just fine. I'm going to close the shade for the moment because it's quite bright in here. I don't want too much light in here. Get the secret mission dockers out in a moment. We've got more tapes in there and some storage in there. No passenger airbag. I don't think you could get one on these P10s at all. P11s, of course, you could get one. Air conditioning button would be there, but of course we don't have anything like that. I like the fact we've got an original radio in here. That's very nice. Normal handbrake and no lid for the storage cubby. Nothing like that. Never mind. And some blanking switches here as well. All the kind of fun of, well, budget motoring. But we do have some good seat adjustment actually here. These three knobs here to get you in the right position. The driving position is very comfortable in this car. We've also got just down there a lever for the fuel door and also the boot, which is typical of the Japanese cars of this era, and that's pretty good. I am very fond of that. Because this is the Series 3, it's a very late one at that. We've got the chrome door handles. They are very proud of the fact this car's got ABS. That came in with the Series 2 models. I think that was either 1992 or 1993. And we've got the chrome grille at the front as well, which is nice. Little bits of chrome like that. This car does need a clean. It does need some wheel trims. Martino's got a hold of some of those. It would look a lot better. I would even personally put some alloy wheels on this if it were me, but you know, that's just me, viewers. Let's have a look in the boot, shall we? I'll have to go back and pop that release, won't I? I like the rear spoiler on this Precision model. I don't know where the decals are for it, but never mind. There we go. Huge boot. Like, so big that you could probably get in there and have a sleep inside. We are in a bit of shade here, so the light isn't the best, but you can see the boot light there. And just a big, nice shape. Lift this up and we've got a spare wheel in there as well. Fantastic. As you can see, this car's in pretty nice condition actually. Apart from the sills, it's a really common area for these to go. That's why a lot of them are scrapped. That, and they're very popular for banger racing. The thing was, because this car came with a carb on the 1.6s until about 1993, 1994, far later than a lot of other cars that had to go through Euro 1 emissions, and there were very few manufacturers that didn't fit fuel injection to get through Euro 1. Nissan thought their engine was so good but didn't need to fit fuel injection, and they were right. I've actually driven a car that didn't have fuel injection with a GA16 engine. I've driven two. A Nissan 100NX and also a Nissan Sunny Traveller or Estate from 1994. That was a very late carb car. This has got fuel injection, but it's such a sweet revving engine, and with a manual gearbox, these are just a delight to drive. So that's one of the best things about these cars. They're quite practical, but they are really nice to drive. And of course, when Ford were developing the Mondeo in the early 1990s, they used this as the benchmark for it. Can you understand why? Because when we go for a drive a bit later on, we'll see how sweetly these things handle. Okay viewers, I realised earlier on I forgot to fill the back seat. We are in a different location, and I apologise if there's construction going on in the background. So these P10s do suffer from saggy headlining. This car doesn't have a saggy headlining. It's a bit dirty, but it's not sagging or anything. This is my driving position. I'm about 5'11", Actually, it's okay. The Sunny, which was slightly smaller than the N14, isn't as spacious as this. There's not much to say really. You've got windy windows in the back, and you know, an ashtray, and no lid for the cubby hole there. But we do have a rear armrest. It's probably had some dog litter in there at some point, but it doesn't really matter if I'm going to hoover up. But it's okay. I'd prefer, you know, some rear electric windows and things like that. But some of you, this is how you like your cars. You like them nice and basic, and this certainly is that. But it's still pretty good. It's definitely family sized. I think the estate might even have a little bit more than this. My head is sort of it's just about brushing the roofline. If you're over 6 foot, it might be a little bit of a challenge. But for most people, this will be absolutely fine. And here we are, viewers, the GA16 engine. They do have cam cover gasket leaks, and if indeed this engine does have a cam cover gasket leak, you can see it. They have a timing chain rather than a timing belt. Now, you can blow head gaskets, and the timing chains can wear out, but that generally is a sign that the engine's been neglected. If you look after them, and I'd say this one has been looked after most of the time. That's just not a difficult problem to sort out, the cam cover gasket leak. Then it should go on for an awfully long time. These are very, very strong engines. They rev really, really nicely. That's why, you know, I've driven this car a few miles today, and it's just such a delight. So quite easy to work. Look at all this space. You can clearly see the gearbox down there on the right-hand side. There's the ABS pump there. This has got power steering. I would avoid the L model of these because you didn't get power steering, and this would be a nightmare without it. But this has got very nice weighty power steering. It's just very easy to work on. It's not, I don't think, too difficult to find bits for this, because the GA16s and the smaller GA14s were used in quite a lot of cars from the time, and it's one of my favourite 4-cylinder engines actually, this one. That's why I came so close to buying one of these myself, but the one I looked at had the same 2 problems this car had, but they were worse. I mean, it had the broken heater resistor. This car has a broken heater resistor. That's not too difficult to sort out. But the rust on that one was much worse than this, far worse. Same colour as well, actually. This sort of turquoise, a very sort of interesting period colour. Right, I better stop waffling on, viewers, and I better go for a drive, I suppose. Excellent. One of the reasons I like these cars so much is because the driving position is really good in these. There's body weight adjustment for the seat, and it's very good to find a good comfortable driving position. There is a little rattle kind of somewhere, but that might just be the cassettes that are in here. When the car was launched in 1990, there were 2 engines available, a 1.6 and a 2 litre. The 2 litre came in 2 states of tune, which was 115 horsepower and 148, I think it was. The 1.6 came on a carb, initially without any cat or anything like that, and those are very, very easy to tune. It's only 95 horsepower, this is 102, this is a later car. I think the fuel injection came for all models in about 1994. But certainly it pulls really cleanly. The 0 to 60 time of this car, it's officially quoted at about 11.5 seconds, but it feels considerably quicker than that. I don't quite know why. Maybe just because the engine's so nice and free revving. I wish I had a rev counter in this one, but never mind. Doesn't matter. Even the LSX that Mr. Coleman had, the very early one, that didn't have a rev counter either. It had 4 electric windows and power steering mercifully, but no rev counter. I don't know why that is. The suspension at the back of this car is actually an independent system. It's not a beam axle or torsion bar or anything like that. The later P11 Primera is actually reverted from the independent system at the back. Now, they're not, let's say, necessarily bad to drive at all. In fact, they're very good. I have driven the P11, but this, if anything, might even be a bit better. Let's put that window up slightly. There we go. I would put the fan on with the blower, but it only works on speed 4, and you won't be able to hear me if I do that. So we're going to have maybe the passenger window open a little bit. Gearbox is absolutely lovely. It's a beautiful gearbox. So this car's done 98,000 miles. You wouldn't really believe that because of the way that it drives. It's got ABS, which is good. Early ones didn't come with that. And the ride actually has a little bit of firm edge to it. There's a lot of things like 90s Nissans and Hondas had. In fact, this car's very similar underneath, something like an N14 Sunny or a Nissan 100NX. They're very similar in terms of the way they're set up. They're not exactly the same, but they are very similar. And of course, if you have an N14 Sunny, then you can get a 1.4 version of this engine as well. The famous SR20 engine initially came with 115 horsepower. It was later on put up to about 123 horsepower, I think it was. I've heard power outputs for those up to 128 horsepower, but I don't think it did have quite that amount of power. I think they had a little bit less than that. If you went for the EZX or later the EGT, then you've got 148. I think it went up to about 150 perhaps. But certainly this, for me, is absolutely all I'd ever need. 1.6 engine in a manual, whether it's the earlier carb or fuel injection one like this. It's just such a sweet car to drive. Now the suspension of this one is a bit tired. It's quite an old car, and that could probably do with looking at some point, but it's still really nice. The steering's really nicely weighted. The gearbox is very positive. It's just a really nice kind of older daily car for use. If you can find that it's not rusty, that's not losing too much oil in the engine compartment. If it just got a cam cover gasket leak like this one, that's not the end of the world really. Then it's very suitable for tooling around it. I forgot to say one thing earlier on, viewers, and it's quite important. There were some diesels available, but as usual, due to controversial government legislation and all kinds of other reasons, we don't talk about diesels on this channel. I mean, the question is, viewers, is this a better car than a Volvo 440 or Volvo 460? The 1.6 litre versions certainly were marketed in direct competition to the 440 and 460. So is this a better car? I think in engineering terms, yes. I mean, it handles better. The gearbox is nicer. You don't get rattly dash so much of it. There is a little bit of dash rattle, but it's nothing as bad as the one I've got. And the design is more modern, but the 440, 460 design was frozen in the early 80s. This is a very up-to-date sort of design for the time. Do I prefer it enough to get one of these and sell the Volvo? No. I mean, I've got a base leather interior in my Volvo, so that does count for a lot. And as far as I'm aware, I'm not sure I've seen a P10 with base leather interior. And also, I'm just more of a kind of person who likes Volvos. I have a very nostalgic connection to them. These, I don't so much. I think they're really, really good cars. And I can see why Martinho has chosen to get this. But I think I'll stick with my Volvo for now. Lloyd Vehicle Consulting stickers, t-shirts and mugs are available by clicking the link to the Google form in the video description below. So when the car was launched in 1990, the trim levels were L, LS, LSX, like the one Mr. Colburn used to have, GS, the one that Mr. James has, GSX, and then the EZX was the most powerful one. When the second phase of cars came out, known as the Series 2, it had things like ABS. Still L, then LX, SLX, not LSX. It's very confusing actually, all this. SGX rather than GSX, and then EGT. I think the power output for the EGT changed with the Series 3 cars that came in around 93, 94. The base model was then called the Equation, which is sort of similar to, I think, this one, which is a special edition right at the end. Then still LX, SLX, SE, then the SRI, that was available 1.6 and 2-litre engines, and the EGT, which I think got a slight power upgrade to about 148 horsepower. The car was actually also known as the Infiniti G20 in certain parts of the world. I can't remember if that was a Japanese or Sunderland built car. And in Taiwan, they also made a version of this car built by, I think, by the Yulong company. The estate model was based on the Japanese domestic market Nissan Avenir, known as the W10 Primera. Those weren't built in Sunderland, they were actually built in Japan, and they looked a little bit different. They're very rare now, actually. You do see them around, though. So viewers, should you consider a P10 Nissan Primera for your hard-earned budget up to £1,000? Well, this car costs, comfortably within no budget reviews money, and there are some things to do, but I quite like it. No surprise really there, but you know, I'm quite fond of these. You've got to look out for whether the car is completely rusty. That's the main thing to look out for. There are other things like this heater resistor, which doesn't work on anything on the Speed 4. And also there might be some engine issues if the car's been abused, but generally these are pretty good. That's why I almost bought one myself. Anyway, thank you so much indeed once again for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like what you leave a comment below, and we shall see you again soon for more inexpensive motoring.